September 19, 1944. Dawn. The fields outside Arracourt, France, disappeared into fog so thick you could lose your hand at arm's length. First Lieutenant James Bannon gripped the turret rim of his M4A1 Sherman, the cold metal slick with condensation. Somewhere in that grey wall, German Panthers were coming. He could hear them, the distinctive deep rumble of Maybach engines, heavy and deliberate. Closer now. His gunner, Corporal Eddie Hayes, pressed against the periscope, searching the mist. "Can't see shit, Lieutenant." Bannon's hand rested on the gunner's shoulder. "Steady. Professional." Inside, his stomach churned. They'd faced Panthers before. In Normandy. In the hedgerows. Standard 75mm shells bouncing off sloped armor like stones off castle walls. Crews burning. The smell you never forget. But today was different. Tucked in their ammunition rack, carefully secured among standard armor-piercing rounds, were 6 shells marked with yellow bands. M93 HVAP. High-velocity armor-piercing. Tungsten carbide cores machined to thousandths of an inch in factories half a world away. 6 rounds. 6 chances to prove that American engineering could answer German steel. The engine rumble grew louder. Bannon's fingers tightened. Hayes, load HVAP. The loader, Private Dixon, extracted the distinctive round from its rack, heavier than standard ammunition, the tungsten core visible through the cross-section window. He slid it home with practiced precision. The breech closed with a metallic snap that echoed in the cramped interior. Up. 75 meters. The Panther materialized from fog like a ghost taking solid form. Massive. Angled armor catching the gray light. The long 75mm gun swiveling, searching. Hayes didn't wait for the full command. His training, his instinct, his months of facing these things, all compressed into instant recognition. Identified. Firing. The 76mm gun recoiled. Inside the Sherman, the world reduced to thunder and hot brass and the smell of propellant. The HVAP round left the muzzle at 1036 meters per second, 244 meters faster than standard ammunition. The tungsten carbide core, one of the hardest materials available to Allied industry, concentrated kinetic energy into a needlepoint of physics and desperation. It struck the Panther's gun mantlet, that curved shield of cast steel protecting the turret front where the gun emerged. 100 millimeters thick. Designed to deflect. Designed to protect. The tungsten core punched through. Inside the German tank, stored beneath the breech, 40 rounds of 75mm ammunition waited. The penetrating HVAP round, traveling faster than sound, arrived before the German crew could register the muzzle flash. Sparks. Ignition. Detonation. The Panther exploded from within. The turret lifted, not dramatically, not Hollywood slow, but with brutal mechanical violence. 50 tons of steel and combusting propellant. The blast wave rolled across fog-shrouded fields. Secondary explosions followed as fuel tanks ruptured. In Bannon's Sherman, silence. 4 men staring. Hayes's hand still on the firing trigger. Dixon frozen mid-reach for the next round. Bannon's voice cracked the moment. Load AP. Traverse left. Watch for more. But his mind was racing. They just killed a Panther. Frontally. At 75 meters. The thing that intelligence said couldn't be done. The thing that got crews killed in Normandy when they tried. The tungsten had worked. Transition, flashback 6 months earlier, to understand why 6 tungsten rounds mattered so desperately, you have to go back. Back to June 1944, when Allied forces landed on Normandy beaches and American armor rolled into French hedgerows expecting one kind of war, and found another. The M4 Sherman was not designed to fight Panthers. American tank doctrine in 1943 emphasized mobility, reliability, and the capacity to support infantry advances. The Sherman excelled at these missions. Its 75 mm gun could destroy German Panzer IVs, eliminate fortified positions, and provide overwhelming fire support. American planners believed specialized tank destroyers would handle heavy German armor while Shermans focused on combined arms operations. Then intelligence got it wrong. Assessments predicted a handful of Panthers in France. Maybe a dozen per Panzer division. Manageable. Instead, by June 1944, 38% of German tanks in theater were Panthers. Not dozens. Hundreds. And they were devastating. The Panther OSG combined an 80 mm frontal glacis plate sloped at 55 degrees, creating effective thickness of 140 mm, with a powerful KWK 42 75 mm high-velocity gun. On paper, it was the best medium tank in Europe. Against this, the Sherman's 75 mm M3 gun was inadequate. At any range. Any angle. Shells simply bounced off the sloped frontal armor, sometimes ricocheting back toward American positions. Lieutenant Bannon learned this the hard way on July 8, south of Corentin. His platoon, advancing to secure a crossroads, encountered two Panthers in hold-down positions. The German tanks waited, patient, exposing only their turrets. Bannon's lead Sherman fired at 800 meters. Clean hit. The armor-piercing shell struck the mantlet, sparked, and deflected into the sky. The Panther's return fire traveled 2,000 meters with lethal accuracy. The lead Sherman erupted in flames. Bannon watched 5 men he trained with, drank with, knew the names of their children, consumed in seconds. He ordered withdrawal. Called for artillery. Followed doctrine. Did everything right. But 5 men still died because his ammunition couldn't penetrate. That night, writing letters to widows he'd never met, Bannon understood something fundamental: technical disadvantage kills. Not through dramatic failures or tactical mistakes. Through physics. Through metallurgy. Through industrial capacity creating weapons your tools cannot answer. Section: The Ordnance Crisis. The crisis reached General Dwight Eisenhower's desk on July 2. Field reports from Normandy painted a grim operational picture. Sherman platoons refusing to engage Panthers, ceding initiative to German forces. Tank destroyer units overwhelmed by demand. Infantry advances stalling without armored support because tank commanders prioritized survival over mission accomplishment. You couldn't blame them. Crews called the Sherman the Ronson Lighter, lights first time, every time. The nickname was darkly unfair. Post-war analysis showed Sherman fires occurred at rates comparable to other tanks, but perception shaped behavior. When crews believe their equipment cannot win, they fight defensively. When they fight defensively, they lose. Eisenhower, confronting ordnance officers, was livid. Witnesses recorded his exact words, delivered with command authority that had coordinated the largest amphibious invasion in history. "You mean our 76 won't knock these Panthers out? I thought it was going to be the wonder gun of the war." The 76 mm M1 gun existed. Shermans equipped with it, designated M4A1 76, had been produced starting January 1944. 130 tanks sat in Britain in April, ready for D-Day. Commanders refused to deploy them. Training time insufficient. Logistics complicated by maintaining 2 ammunition types. Overconfidence that 75 mm guns would prove adequate. By the time reality corrected these assumptions, men had died preventably. On July 12, a board convened to assess the crisis. Their conclusion, documented in official reports: standard American tank weapons could not defeat Panther frontal armor at combat ranges. Immediate deployment of 76 mm Shermans was mandatory. 102 M4A1 76 tanks reached frontline units by July 25 for Operation Cobra. Crews who received them felt hope, briefly. The 76 mm was better than 75. Its M62 armor-piercing round could penetrate 109 mm at 1,000 meters. Against Panzer IVs, excellent. Against Panthers, marginal. The sloped glacis remained effectively immune except at very close range or perfect angles. The mantlet could be penetrated, but only under 600 meters, suicidally close against a tank that could kill you at 2,000. The solution wasn't a bigger gun. The solution was better ammunition. American ordnance engineers, working under impossible deadlines, turned to tungsten. Section, the metallurgy answer, tungsten carbide. One of the hardest materials accessible to World War II industry. Melting point 3,500 degrees Celsius. Density 15.6 grams per cubic centimeter, twice that of steel. The physics were elegant. A projectile's penetrating power depends on kinetic energy, mass times velocity squared. By using a dense tungsten core surrounded by lightweight aluminum carrier, designers maximized velocity while concentrating energy into a smaller, harder penetrator. The T4 round, standardized as M93 HVAP, achieved muzzle velocity of 1,036 meters per second compared to 792 for standard M62 ammunition. That 244 meter per second increase translated directly into penetrating capability. At 1,000 yards, HVAP could penetrate 160 millimeters of armor at 10 degrees obliquity. Against the Panther's curved mantlet, 100 millimeters of cast steel, this meant reliable penetration at ranges up to 1,000 meters instead of point-blank desperation. But development was only half the battle. Each HVAP round required approximately 0.8 kilograms of tungsten carbide. Tungsten was strategic material imported primarily from China, which produced 36% of global supply before the war. American tungsten demand was ferocious: machine tools for aircraft production, armor plate hardening, industrial dyes, cutting equipment, and now ammunition for multiple calibers. Every HVAP round competed directly with B-17 bomber production. Ordnance officers faced impossible calculus: how many aircraft engines should we sacrifice to give tank crews 6 rounds? Production began slowly. July 1944, 1,003-inch rounds for tank destroyers. August, 1,076 mm. September, 1,076 mm. Not until November did monthly production reach 5,000, ramping to 7,000 by January 1945. By March 1945, total production, 33,000 rounds. That number sounds impressive until you calculate distribution. Average allocation by February 1945, 5 rounds per 76 mm Sherman. 5 tungsten cores to face an enemy fielding Panthers as standard equipment. A Sherman company, 17 tanks, possessed 85 HVAP rounds total. Enough for 5 rounds per tank if supply was perfect, if bureaucracy functioned flawlessly, if logistics never failed. In reality, some units received more than they could use immediately. Others exhausted supplies within days and received no resupply despite urgent requests. James Bannon's company received their allocation on September 15, 6 rounds per tank. The briefing was terse. New ammunition. Tungsten core. Effective against Panther mantlets out to 1,000 meters. Use wisely. Hayes, Bannon's gunner, studied the penetration charts obsessively. Dixon, the loader, practiced extraction and loading until he could do it blindfolded. Bannon drilled crew coordination, identification, range estimation, target priority. They had 4 days before German forces counterattacked. Section, German counterattack. General Otto von Manschuffel's 5th Panzer Army received orders to destroy American bridgeheads across the Moselle River. General George Patton's 3rd Army had advanced aggressively, seizing crossings near Arracourt. If American armor reached the Rhine and crossed into Germany, the industrial roar would be exposed. For the counterattack, German High Command assembled 2 panzer brigades, the 111th and 113th, combined strength approximately 150 tanks, including the newly formed 113th Panzer Brigade with 90 tanks and assault guns, 42 Panthers and 40 Panzer IVs. Against this, Combat Command A of 4th Armored Division deployed roughly 50 Sherman tanks. On paper, German victory seemed assured. Panthers possessed superior armor, superior firepower, superior optics. German doctrine emphasized first shot kills at maximum range, exploiting technical advantages. But doctrine is written for perfect conditions. War happens in fog. September 19. The 113th Panzer Brigade advanced without proper reconnaissance, a critical error born of overconfidence and inexperience. Many crews had only weeks of training, straight from factories to front lines. They moved in column formation through fog, unable to see American defensive positions, unable to coordinate combined arms support. German artillery lagged behind. Luftwaffe was non-existent. Allied air superiority meant daylight. German movement invited annihilation. American forces, by contrast, were veterans. 4th Armored Division had fought across France, learning combined arms warfare through brutal experience. They knew terrain. They coordinated with artillery and forward air controllers. Most critically, they understood their equipment's limitations and strengths. Bannon's platoon occupied hull-down positions south of Arracourt. The terrain favored defense, gentle rises providing cover for tank hulls while exposing only turrets. Fields of fire converged on approach routes. Fallback positions were predetermined. And now they had tungsten. Section, battle joined, the fog that morning was a gift. Panthers advancing at 700 meters were invisible. At 300, barely silhouettes. But at 75 meters, the range where HVAP was most devastating, targets materialized with sudden, total clarity. After Bannon's first kill, the pattern repeated across the sector. Captain Lamesson's Charlie Company, positioned along the southern approaches, engaged multiple Panthers as they emerged from mist. American crews exploited shock and limited visibility. German tankers, trained to believe their frontal armor guaranteed survival, advanced confidently until tungsten cores punched through mantlets and ignited ammunition. 3 Panthers destroyed in the first 15 minutes. 5 more disabled by flank shots as German columns, disoriented by fog and unexpected resistance, exposed vulnerable side armor. The psychological impact was immediate and severe. German radio chatter, intercepted and translated by American intelligence, revealed confusion bordering on panic. American tanks penetrating frontally, how? New gun. 88s. Fall back, regroup. Panthers that had dominated Normandy through technological superiority suddenly faced opponents who could kill them. The psychological security of thick armor, the confidence that came from knowing standard American shells bounced off, vanished. German crews became cautious. Hesitant. Defensive. And in armored warfare, hesitation is death. By noon, fog lifted. American forward observers coordinated artillery time-on-target missions. P-47 Thunderbolts of the 405th Fighter Group arrived overhead, diving through broken clouds to strike German armor with rockets and 50-caliber machine guns. The combination was devastating. German tanks, advancing without infantry or adequate flak support, were isolated and destroyed piecemeal. HVAP ammunition didn't make Shermans technically equal to Panthers. But it made them dangerous enough that Panthers couldn't simply rely on frontal armor. German crews had to maneuver, seek cover, fight tactically, and that equalized the battlefield. Bannon's platoon, repositioning to cover the eastern approaches, encountered 2 more Panthers at 400 meters. Both were destroyed with HVAP rounds through the mantlet. The third HVAP round he fired, his crew watched the tungsten core strike true, the distinctive spark of penetration followed by internal fire. No Hollywood explosion. Just physics. Tungsten versus steel. Kinetic energy transferred. Catastrophic failure. By September 22, the German offensive stalled completely. The 113th Panzer Brigade, which entered battle with 90 tanks and assault guns, could muster fewer than 20 operational vehicles. American losses: 25 Sherman tanks, 7 tank destroyers. The kill ratio, 86 to 32, heavily favored American forces despite technical disadvantage. Section: Aftermath and Analysis. The Battle of Arracourt's significance extended far beyond immediate tactical results. For American tank crews, it represented psychological liberation. They learned definitively that Panthers could be defeated without specialized tank destroyers or overwhelming air support. Crews that had approached engagements with genuine apprehension now fought aggressively, confident that skill and ammunition could overcome armor. Morale transformed. Bannon noticed it immediately in his platoon. Hayes, the gunner, joked about Panther hunting. Dixon kept the remaining HVAP rounds polished. The crew's conversation shifted from survival tactics to offensive maneuver. For German forces, the opposite occurred. Captured after-action reports revealed bitter recrimination. How had technically superior Panthers been defeated so comprehensively? Intelligence officers examining destroyed vehicles found small entry holes suggesting subcaliber projectiles. Analysis of undetonated rounds recovered near disabled tanks revealed the truth: Americans were deploying tungsten-core ammunition. This discovery had profound strategic implications. Germany itself had developed similar ammunition, Panzergranate 40, using tungsten cores. But by late 1944, German tungsten supplies were critically depleted. Swedish imports, Germany's primary source, had declined sharply as Allied diplomatic pressure and military success turned neutral nations cautious. German industry, forced to prioritize, allocated scarce tungsten to machine tools rather than ammunition. If Americans could field specialized tungsten ammunition in sufficient quantities to distribute to frontline tank units, it demonstrated industrial capacity Germany could not match. Not only were American tanks more numerous and better supported logistically, they now possessed ammunition that partially negated carefully engineered German armor advantages. Section: The scarcity problem, but sufficient quantities, remain tragically relative. By December 1944, when German forces launched their Ardennes offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, American tank units faced renewed crisis. German forces deployed hundreds of Panthers and Tiger tanks in winter conditions that limited Allied air superiority. Sherman crews relied desperately on their scarce HVAP ammunition. Some units exhausted supplies within 48 hours of heavy fighting. Resupply requests went unfulfilled as logistics networks struggled through snow-blocked roads and German counterattacks disrupted supply lines. Sergeant Francis Baker's experience, documented in official combat reports, illustrated VAP's limitations. On November 20, his Sherman engaged a Panther at 800 yards. 7 rounds fired. Multiple hits observed on the Panther's side armor. 0 penetrations achieved. The tungsten core, below optimal velocity at extended range, shattered on impact rather than penetrating. The Panther withdrew, but the engagement demonstrated that HVAP was not magical. Proper employment, correct range, favorable angle, precise shot placement, remained essential. By February 1945, allocation had improved marginally. Average, 5 rounds per tank. Total production through March, 33,000 rounds. Enough to equip approximately 6,600 tanks with 5 rounds each. 4th Armored Division alone fielded over 180 Shermans. Do the math. Supply never matched demand. Yet even limited availability transformed battlefield psychology. Crews knowing they possessed ammunition capable of defeating Panthers fought differently, more aggressively, more confidently, even if they never fired an HVAP round in combat. Section: Korean Vindication, June 1950. The Korean War erupted, and once again, Sherman tanks faced communist armor, this time Soviet-built T-34-85s in North Korean service. The situation differed fundamentally from Europe. By 1950, tungsten scarcity no longer constrained production. Substantial HVAP stocks were available. American Sherman tanks, primarily M4A3E8 variants with 76mm guns, received plentiful HVAP ammunition. Results were decisive. The T-34-85, while formidable against Japanese tanks in Manchuria and effective during Soviet offensives in 1945, possessed armor inferior to the Panther. Its 90mm turret front and 45mm glacis could not resist tungsten-core projectiles at normal combat ranges. American Shermans in Korea achieved remarkably favorable exchange ratios. HVAP ammunition, no longer constrained by supply limitations, performed exactly as ordnance engineers had promised. For veterans like James Bannon, if he survived to see it, Korea was bittersweet vindication. The ammunition that could have been fielded more widely in Europe proved devastatingly effective when supply matched demand. Section, Legacy, September 19, 1944. First Lieutenant James Bannon's gunner fired the HVAP round that killed a Panther at 75 meters in fog. That moment, replicated across the Arracourt battlefield by dozens of Sherman crews, marked a genuine turning point. Not because tungsten made Shermans equal to Panthers on technical specifications. They weren't. Panther armor remained superior. Panther guns remained more powerful. But warfare is not conducted on technical specifications alone. Victory depends on industrial capacity producing adequate weapons in overwhelming numbers. On logistics delivering ammunition to crews who need it. On combined arms doctrine integrating armor with artillery and air power. On crew training and tactical skill. On morale sustained through confidence that your equipment gives you fighting chance. HVAP ammunition, despite chronic scarcity, provided that confidence. German crews who had relied on invulnerability now fought cautiously, defensively, surrendering initiative. American crews who had felt outmatched now fought aggressively, creating tactical opportunities. The shift in psychological balance influenced every subsequent armored engagement. Modern armor-piercing ammunition, whether depleted uranium or tungsten alloy penetrators in APF-SDS rounds, descends directly from HVAP principles. Concentrate maximum kinetic energy into dense penetrator moving at highest achievable velocity. The M1 Abrams main battle tank was named for Creighton Abrams, who commanded the 37th Tank Battalion at Arracourt with distinction. The lessons Abrams learned about combined arms warfare, ammunition effectiveness, and crew confidence influenced American armor doctrine for generations. Closing, James Bannon survived Arracourt. Survived the Battle of the Bulge. Made it home to Indiana in late 1945. He never spoke much about the war, most didn't, but he kept something in his workshop. A single HVAP round, spent casing, mounted on a wooden plaque. His grandson asked him once what it meant. Bannon, old then, hands scarred from decades of farm work, held the brass casing, feeling its weight. 6 rounds, he said quietly. We had 6 rounds that could kill Panthers. Had to make them count. He paused, remembering fog and thunder and Hayes's voice, identified, firing, and the Panther exploding at 75 meters. They counted. The crews who fired those first tungsten rounds in combat, watching cores punch through armor that intelligence said was impenetrable, demonstrated something fundamental: industrial capacity and material science, applied intelligently to urgent tactical problems, can overcome seemingly insurmountable disadvantages. This lesson, learned at considerable cost on battlefields across Europe, remains directly relevant for military planners facing technological challenges of modern warfare. 6 tungsten rounds. 6 chances. When fired by trained crews who understood their value, supported by doctrine that maximized their strengths and minimized their limitations, backed by industrial capacity that produced them despite resource scarcity, 6 rounds were enough to change warfare's psychological balance. That's the legacy of Arracourt. That's the legacy of tungsten. That's the legacy of men like James Bannon who made every shot count.